just to simply make time to have a conversation, speaking from personal experience, that can completely change the way a person feels about their work and their job, especially when we're talking about someone who is a remote employee and is perhaps feeling isolated, which is real.
It starts up front with setting expectations with teams, with the stakeholders. It also starts with having a leader that's approachable. If you've got somebody that's in that manager or leadership role and they set out all these ground rules, but A, they're never available, or if they're approached with a question from a team member and they act in a negative way about it, that team member may not feel comfortable ever coming forward again, and that can be a derailer for the project.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. Today we have a special guest. We have Tanya Boyd with us. And Tanya is a dynamic project manager with over 2 decades of experience leading initiatives across disaster recovery, healthcare, IT, marketing, and government sectors. Known for blending creativity with strategy, Tanya brings a fresh, engaging approach to every stage of the project lifecycle. And I'm so excited to have Tanya here with us today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for asking me. I'm glad to be here with you today. And I'm looking forward to it.
Yay. And you're coming to us from Louisiana, correct?
Live from Lafayette, Louisiana, known as Cajun country, where the swamplands, boudin, crawfish, and gumbo.
I'm gonna come visit you sometime, and we're gonna eat some gumbo.
You should. That you would love the food. That's kind of what we're known for, is the food, the fun, and the festivals. So
that sounds amazing. It's rainy here right now, so festival just sounds amazing. I'm super excited about our topic today. We're going to talk about transformation, specifically transformational leadership in project management. And transformation in general is one of my favorite subjects. And that's one of the reasons why I'm drawn to project management, because we're really taking an idea and transforming it into a product or an outcome. And the interesting thing is we can also be transformational with ourselves and help our teams transform too as we're going through these projects. And I just find so often in my career, those projects that I've been a part of that really stood out had leadership that was focused on not only the outcome of the project, but helping the team grow, helping the team transform too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm excited to get it started because I think that's so important. So
it is. Yeah, that human-centered approach. So Tanya and I are going to talk through a few different topics and give everyone some insight into how they can introduce transformational leadership into their projects. And yeah, let's get started with our first topic. I've been a part of projects before that were really successful, right? Like we hit all the marks, we finished on time, et cetera. But then when you get to the retrospective, everyone's kind of like lackluster. And actually it comes out that they're not really satisfied with what happened during the project or the outcome, or maybe even just how they feel in general. Those situations have really caused me to think about what does success in our projects actually look like? And how can we move past this more transactional project management into that transformational leadership? How have you seen this play out?
I've definitely seen it play out. I've seen it where it's a success on paper, but you get to the end, like you said, and it's not exactly what they wanted, and they aren't, I guess, delighted by the project. So I've seen several different approaches that have worked well. I know that we're kind of in an environment where we've got your waterfall project management, your agile, and then your hybrid. I tend to be more on, I guess, what you would call the agile mindset. Not so much like the buzzwords of agile or anything like that, but just checking in with the client often, making sure that what we are building is aligning with their expectations, letting them have ownership in it. And it can be a tricky balance sometimes because I've seen a lot of clients that want to just, they're very busy in their day-to-day lives. So they hire contractors, right, to do the work, but then they don't want to make the time to meet with the contractors. They just want it to be done. So it's really kind of in the beginning stages of that relationship, making sure that the clients understand that they are going to need to be available and are going to need to be accountable for
Yeah.
those conversations to make sure we're delivering what it is that they truly want. So that's part of the equation. I feel like there's many other parts to it as well, and we can kind of keep digging into that if you want.
Yeah. I kind of to piggyback off of that, I've been a part of those projects too, where it's like, oh no, we don't need check-ins. The stakeholders don't want the check-ins, or the client doesn't want the check-in, right? Because they're busy,
Right.
just like you said. And then you get to the end of it, and it's like, oh, this isn't what we wanted, or they want to make a bunch of changes. And
Right.
um, that's where those regular check-ins really come in handy, and not just with the client, but also with the team as well, because it's
Absolutely.
communication and communication breakdowns. This is what causes that disappointment. When you really start digging into it in those retrospectives, it's almost always like, well, this person didn't communicate that with me, or like, I didn't get this email. I wasn't copied on that.
Scapegoat.
Yes.
Yes, yes. Yeah. And I think that's definitely important. I mean, so it is. It's two-pronged. It's not just your stakeholders or the clients that you work for, but it's also your internal team. It is checking in with them. It's making sure that they have what they need to do the job properly. And we've all got different personalities. We've all got different working styles. I mean, I've always been the person that when I have a question, I raise my hand. Not immediately. Like I will do some due diligence and I'll try to self triage the questions, or the answers that I've got and figure it out for myself. And now, certainly with things like Chat GPT, that enables people, a lot more people, to be able to do that and figure it out quicker without totally spinning wheels. But I always raise my hand if I'm totally spinning my wheels. There's a lot of team members or a lot of people that just don't. They'll
Yes.
ruminate on it for days. And even there's times where you can be doing the internal check-ins with your team and you can be asking all the right questions. You're saying, is there anything blocking you? Is there anything stopping you? How long do you think that this will take? Is there anything that I can do to help? And oftentimes people still do not communicate or say, hey, there's an issue and I need this. So I think a lot of that education, it starts up front with setting expectations with teams, with the stakeholders. It also starts with having a leader that's approachable. If you've got somebody that's in that manager or leadership role and they set out all these ground rules, but A, they're never available, or if they're approached with a question from a team member and they act in a negative way about it, that team member may not feel comfortable ever coming forward again. And that can be a derailer for the project. So
Yeah.
even with continuous learning, I mean, there's no one silver bullet to project management. So I think our continuous learning just on different styles of leadership, communication, personalities, all of that just continues to evolve. And we've constantly got to work on ourselves to make sure we're keeping up with that and being mindful, even as a leader, going, okay, it's too quiet. I haven't heard anything and nobody's asking
Mhm.
questions. Maybe I be the proactive one and check in to see if they're doing okay. So just
Yes.
opening doors for conversation as much as is reasonable, I guess.
You know what? Yeah, and to go back to that to transformation, right? Like how do we ensure that our teams are also transforming? You said it. You said it. Asking the questions and having the conversations. that's where it happens. And we have to give our teams a safe space to do that. We have to. Otherwise, they're not going to ask the questions. And then we complete the project, and maybe not only did it not hit the mark, but they're also feeling lackluster about it. Like, oh, I just went through the motions again and did what I needed to do. But no one feels transformed. No one feels different. No one feels like they grew or learned anything. And I think what you said about asking questions and making it safe to have the conversations, it's huge.
I think even the right mix of work, so I mean, I read a lot about, and I've never really worked for a company per se that has the devoted, you know, this many hours a week to professional development. It's always kind of implied to do it, but it's never like a written rule, where 80% is your work and 20% is professional development. But I have had organizations that even while it's not written in stone, it is encouraged. But I've also worked for organizations where, nope, you learn on the job. Don't worry about professional development. So I think that right mix of work, because you're right. I mean, people can be doing the job, they can have no blockers, but if they're doing something where they don't feel connected to the purpose, or it's same thing day in, day out, where they cannot learn new skills, then they might not have the opportunity to grow. So even being, if you're in an organization, see if your organization offers that. If they do not, people listening, just taking the initiative to pick up different skills that you want to learn and find learning paths for that or mentors is super important. Because even where I work, we a lot of it is some of it have the dynamics of like a startup company. So there's always different swirling things that are going on and new skills to constantly learn because the work is constantly changing. And I've had to learn about myself. Okay, I can do this and I can do this well, but if I do only this, I'm going to burn out. You might need to give me some creative work because that's what fills my bucket. But at the same time, if I'm expending, and I expend so much energy on being creative and doing presentations that I can literally burn out my own light bulb. So then I need to flip back to, I have on my headphones and I'm able to do documentation.
Right.
So making sure you understand who is on your team, what kind of things they are interested in, what level they might be at and where to even get them started so you can gradually move them into different roles to fill, different vacancies or needs that you may have.
Yes.
That and the cross training is so important. And just having a good team culture where it's really encouraged for people to talk to each other, because sometimes I've seen silos that you're over project management, so you have to go confer with these 20 different divisions, but they're kind of told, she's not over you. She's not really your project manager. You don't have to worry about her
Right.
so much.
Oh,
And it's like,
yes.
how am I going to get this done? you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I also firmly believe that it's just not an excuse. It's not a good excuse to say we don't have time for that, or we don't even have, I've heard, we don't even have time for one-on-ones. We're just so busy. We don't have time for one-on-ones. We don't have time to support our team in any way. Maybe there is no budget for some of this other stuff, and that's fine. I understand that, but um just to simply make time to have a conversation, speaking from personal experience, that can completely change the way a person feels about their work and their job, especially when we're talking about someone who is a remote employee and is perhaps feeling isolated, which is real.
Yes, it is. I mean, and even like, so my roles, it was when I moved to Lafayette in 2019, I was on site. And then the pandemic happened, went through a layoff. The next role I was onboarded, but it was remotely. I got a few chances to go into the office, but then another layoff. And then the next one I had some travel, and it was a bit of hybrid, whereas this that I'm in now is pretty much it's pretty much remote. But we check in with each other a lot, and I like the dynamic where I'm at currently too, because I do have somebody that's, the boss that is very open to conversations when there's the time, and I can be very transparent, which I like. I've found that at my age now, I've been able to be lucky to find cultures where I can communicate authentically what's on my mind, what's working, what's not working, and even tell my own team, maybe we've scope creeped ourselves on this project. It
Mm.
wasn't even our client. We did this. We gold plated the entire thing, and that's why it took longer. But I feel like there's a maturity level there that they're willing to take that feedback and think about it and offer better solutions in the future, which to me, that's the ideal state. You know, it's no team is going to have it perfect. No team is going to have it better than another team. But if you at least have the opportunity to work with people that you can be transparent, authentic, that gives you the opportunity to have a fail-safe environment, as long as you learn from your lessons and figure out how to improve, like, I think that's the most important thing because it leads to progress in the future.
Absolutely. And this is where the importance of our own personal growth and development comes in. And we certainly can't make other people do that for themselves. But
No.
when we have teams that prioritize that prioritize boundaries and self-care and their own personal growth and development, and you get a team together and they're all on the same level, that's like that's a totally different kind of team
It
than
is.
folks that are maybe not quite there, and you're going to have push and pull, you're going to have struggle, you're going to have he said she said, and it's going to be difficult for them to get out of more of more of an, I don't know, ego first kind of a state
Right.
versus teams that are ready to be honest, transparent, vulnerable. They have that safety. It's a totally different dynamic, totally different. So we
It's
have to
completely
prioritize that.
different. And I'm glad for it too, because I have worked in environments before, I'll tell you about one of my favorite roles and something that I felt was transformational. So it was a large healthcare project where we were working on a systems modernization. We were replacing the old and putting in the new. I had a lot of different roles on that. It was communication, project manager, got to learn the rules, got to do testing, safety officer. It was a whole mix of tricks, but one of my favorite things was being a wellness coordinator. We had this sort of self-organized little group that would write about wellness. We'd host the lunch and learns, and it was at a point in my life, honestly, I had gone through the loss of my mother, just a few years before that. And I was having some struggles where I was like, you know what, there's some bad habits that I have, maybe it's drinking or staying up too late or whatever, that I need to start working on myself, eating healthier, prioritizing my self-care and my wellness to get over this grief. So I wound up taking on that role of being the person of like writing all the wellness things and organizing all these things and doing the morning walks. And I was very transparent with people that, hey, I wound up getting into really great shape and everybody was like, you're the health guru. And I was like, not always, certainly not always. I've gone through my own trials and tribulations, but this gave me a reason to step into that role for myself and my own transformation and my own well-being because I needed to become that person, and then it made me inspired. And when I started doing my writing, it inspired other people too. So, like, fun things for me with people at the water cooler, because this was before the pandemic, would say, are you the girl that wrote about eating frozen vegetables versus canned because they're less sodium? I said, yep. And one of the women was like, thank you for that. I'm taking care of my elderly parents, and they both have kidney problems. And I never realized that. So I went to Walmart and I bought all the bags, and so like, I'm like, okay, try not to cry, try not to be puddles at the
Gosh.
water cooler. But when you realize that, like, because you never think about stuff like that. But when people tell you, you impacted my life in a better way, I was in a really bad place and I needed to read something positive, then you're like, wow. So that became like so much more important then. And so for me, that was a big transformation. And I mean, I went on to move, get out of that role, different things of that nature, but I've also been part of teams in the past where self-care, vacation, nature walks outside was not the priority at all. And I felt like I was struggling because it was like, well, don't y'all need balance? We need no balance. And I'm like, oh, goodness.
Oh my
So that was
gosh.
really, really tough for me because I was like, I don't know how to be the person that's on all the time. I give a whole lot and I give my everything, but I can't do it 24/7 or I'll burn out. So I try to be that empathetic team player, whether I'm in a direct leader position or whether I'm just a team contributor and somebody to talk to. Because I just think that everybody needs that on a
Mm.
team. They don't need to be scapegoated, they don't need to be blamed. You could have the best person on the team that just made a misstep in their work because they're exhausted, their kid is sick, they've got an ailing family member or something they're not comfortable sharing with the whole team. So it is.
Mhm.
It's so important to be a human at work and
Oh
help.
yeah. I
So
love your story about working in was it a wellness company? Was it
no, so it was
okay.
a government company. It's a
Okay.
government health
Well,
agency. And
I
it
love
was such a
that.
big contract too, and it was like even when you're in corporate versus government versus different things, the dynamic is different. So I had so much fun with it too. Because I was like, I felt such a response from people, and I'm like, people need this and I'm going to do it.
It was
So
I think the cool thing is it was what you needed at that time. It
it
was meant to
was.
be all around. It's what you needed at that time. And then you were able to channel that passion and further make an impact on other people, which is really what it's all about. And your other points about self-care and prioritizing that time for, yes, going for walks, having days off, sleeping, which sometimes isn't even prioritized. I've worked for those companies before, especially at startup when it's just a certain level of energy. And a lot of people, at least when I was working in startups, were younger. And so you don't have the families or the responsibilities. And you could
Right,
absolutely stay there all night and work, but should you? And
right.
the interesting thing is that many times where we find our inspiration and those ideas and those moments, it comes from quiet. It comes from stillness. It comes from just being. So
Agreed.
if we want to invite that into our work,
For
we
our work.
can't be on all the time. It doesn't make any sense. Our brains are going to be overloaded.
Agreed. I took, on nature walks, and even though this is like the opposite of stillness, I used to get idea when I exercised all the time, so I went through this phase. I went through that transformation phase. I started kickboxing in Baton Rouge, and when I moved to Lafayette, I kept up with the kickboxing and not now because all half the gyms are closed and I fell off. But like I used to be addicted to the kickboxing and I would find myself in class, even when I was trying to remember if I was punching my left or right and which leg I was kicking, I was getting adrenaline, but I'd get these right ideas and everybody would laugh at me because I go run off the mat and I go text myself an idea. Because I loved writing and
Yeah.
presentations and stuff. And they were like, what is she doing now? And I run to the locker room, jot it down, come run back and kick the bag. And they were like, how does that work? I was like, I don't
You
know. I
got
said,
something
just,
moving. Yeah, like with your bot. I don't
and
know.
even music for me, like that's something to me that personal that I find music. And so I loved your Tracy Lawrence This Morning Time Marches On.
Mhm.
I love that song, but like I find so much inspiration from the stories and lyrics and music. It'll bring me back to a time when I remember that song playing. It'll even give me additional ideas too. So whether it's stillness or even if I'm adrenaline exercise, those seem to be when ideas come, I guess.
Mm, mm.
So,
Yeah. I'm thinking about this in the context of our teams that we work with and lead. How can we? Because what I've seen sometimes is you can encourage people and tell people like, oh, here's what I do and it's really helpful, or like take some time off, right? But it seems like
right,
there's always those couple of folks that maybe don't want to do that because they don't feel like they need to, or they don't want to look like they're not working as hard. So they
right.
decline the invitation, but then end up later on in a stage of burnout. So
Burnout.
yeah, what are some ways we can incorporate that dynamic into our teams?
That one can be a hard one, because even knowing what motivates people, or like, the Herzberg motivational theory, not
Mhm.
all people are motivated by money, not all people are motivated by time off. And then sometimes, depending upon your age or stage of life, that flips. I do think the time off is important, but I know what you're saying too, because I know a lot of people that don't take it because they're worried about that. And I've even seen some studies where if there's unlimited PTO, a lot of times people don't take as much as they would if it was a certain time allotted.
Mhm.
So some of that, I guess, maybe needs to start at the leadership level, not mandating, but just continually reminding. Because again, if you've got somebody that's worried about taking it off, that they're going to look bad, if their manager is always like, you need to take some time off, they may overthink that or internalize that as I'm doing something wrong. They're telling me to take time off.
Mhm.
So it's
Mhm.
just finding a way at the top level to motivate people to take their time. There was something, and this was something I heard a lady say at a PMI global conference. So she was the CEO of a company, and I don't remember the origin of what inspired her to get up, but whatever session we were listening to, she got up and she shared her story that she was the CEO and that she would always try to encourage her team, but she never did it herself for like 7 years. And then finally, the pressure built up so much where she did, and her team was like, thank you for doing that. And they felt more receptive to take their time because they saw her set the standard that she had been talking about. And
Right.
she admitted to all the CEOs that feel like everything is going to fall down if you step away. It won't. If you've got the right team, give yourself some grace. And if you don't, you are going to burn out and not be the best leader that you can be.
Yes.
You know,
Yes. And I think sometimes too, when you have teams that are very loyal and the CEO doesn't take time off, they don't want to take time off either because, or you all so much believe in what it is that you're building, it's hard to
right,
take that time off. It's hard to take the break. But like you said, it's a top down kind of a thing. And we have to not only say it, but really show and model the
agreed,
behavior too.
agreed.
I remember one place in particular where I worked, it was one of those places where anytime you ask someone how they're doing, I'm so busy. I'm so busy, right? Like that's the only answer you could give. And it would drive me
Right.
crazy. It would drive me crazy. And so
Yeah.
I started saying all kinds of like adjectives about how I was that wasn't busy, and everybody would always kind of look at me like, oh, I'm fabulous, or I'm. And they're thinking, what's wrong with her? Is she not working?
No, I would feel the same way. I mean, if that was the culture that I was met with and nobody wanted to talk and nobody ever wanted to spend the time, then you have no relationship connection point, and it's really, really, really tough to feel invested in the work that you're doing or the company that you work for if they cannot figure out how to form relationships. And to me, it's not even on the internal team, but like if you're working for an organization like that, how do they get clients? You know, I mean, to me, building, if you're building a sales funnel or relationship based building, it all starts with that. Like I'll speak for myself. I have never been one that has been very great at sales, and this even started in my young days. I remember when I was in mortgage origination having to make sales. And if a customer didn't need with what I was selling, I remember getting in trouble by my manager because it was something like I was talking to somebody in California, and at the time they could do stated income. They made $75,000 between the two of them, wanted to buy a $500,000 house. I could have put that down because they could state whatever income they wanted, but I think I cautioned them against it and I got in trouble. And my manager was like, "You're horrible at sales." And I was like, "You're right, I probably am," because I really want to be able to give people what they need. And even in today's world, niche down and DM and just automatic sale. I'm not good at that. I have figured out that I can build business by relationships and through trust, and then just continually, you know, being there for people. And when my career changes, like when I moved from the volunteer past president to, okay, I'm doing more speaking, I'm doing more content creation. I have courses that people could buy, or I'm a photographer. I just started trying to change the energy to where people saw that transformation happening, to where it would come up in conversation and I didn't have to feel like, "Hey, I'm doing this now, buy from me." Because that's never going to be, that's not my
No,
complete strategy. So,
no. So we have similar backgrounds. I was in mortgage origination too. Um, and actually, I have only had one sales job and I got fired from it. I got fired. They were like, "You are so bad at this." And I didn't argue. I was absolutely bad at what they wanted me to do because
yes.
I
Yep.
just can't, if it doesn't feel right in here, and if I know it's
Yeah.
not, then there's no way I could ever convince someone else. I'm really bad at poker. This whole thing is not good for
I
that.
joke about that. I am terrible at it unless I'm actually playing the game. Now, if I'm in Texas Hold'em with you, I am an amazing actress. I will fake everybody out and I will beat them at the table in actual poker. But when it comes to real life, I just can't do it. People can tell when I'm mad. They can tell when I'm sad. They can tell when I'm just about to roll my eyes. It's always been very transparent, and anybody that's ever worked with me knows it's almost like a joke.
Yeah.
So sometimes when I have to go into serious client facing meetings, there is times that I have to work on the poker face a bit more than I would with my internal team. But it's the same thing. It's like for sales, if I don't believe that you are truly going to benefit from what it is that I am selling or pitching, then I can't sell it. Like even last year, I did a lot of, I was on a contract helping one of my very good friends with his third book on emotional intelligence. That required a sales component, that did require a direct message strategy. But again, it depends upon the product too. It's a great book. I had read it. Emotional intelligence hurts no one. They can earn PDUs through reading. And it was around $20. So it's not like I'm out soliciting some high ticket item. So even though I was uncomfortable with sales, I did that too, and I felt like I did that pretty well. But again, that's a different product. And I was like, learning emotional intelligence, however you learn it through a book, will never be a bad thing. I
Because
was like, I
again,
just,
Yeah, again, it's all about the transformation. Like, we don't want to sell something. You were talking about selling this mortgage product that was probably not going to help these people grow. And, it was probably going to set them back. And so
Yeah.
that's not a positive transformation, but a book about
Right.
emotional intelligence that, is something that what you said was it's going to help everyone. Like, everyone's going to benefit if we can learn this skill.
Right.
That's transformation. And that's where the difference is for me is it transformation or is it not? Is it coming from a giving place or is it coming from a taking place? Do I just want to
Right.
exchange something for dollars, or do I want
Right.
to give a transformation to someone? That's the
Right.
difference.
I agree. And even on mortgage origination during that time, it was right before the mortgage industry kind of imploded, and
Hmm.
everything just busted because, a lot of that they were doing stated
Subprime
income.
lending and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so I worked through that too, and I had gotten to disaster recovery by the time that the mortgage industry imploded, and the place I was working at the time wasn't subprime, but even if you're buying a $500,000 house and a $75,000 income, that's going to be a pretty tough stretch. Um, but I did do subprime lending for a little bit, and I literally only stayed 2 months because I couldn't stomach it. It was like, somebody that was on grandma who was on Social Security, but she has poor credit. Will you hit her up with, 15%? And I was like, I can't do it,
Mhm. No.
and it wasn't, I had to learn that that wasn't me and I had to get out of that industry. And then when I got into disaster recovery, like, I felt like that was a game changer for me because I mean, my job came about because other people suffered, which was that is completely unfortunate, but I felt like in that role, it was just starting up, and that program kind of set the standard for a lot of programs that happened later in New Jersey after Sandy, in Galveston and Ike, and even in Puerto Rico. And so I had a chance to work frontline with the applicants. And a lot of it, I mean, we were figuring out how to get them the federal dollars. So I basically had to walk them through how to cut through all of this red tape in layman's terms that they could understand, that they could figure out how to apply. So there was a lot of hand holding, but I was very empathetic to it because I was like, these are people that have just lost everything.
Yeah.
They need somebody to guide them through, they need somebody to be kind, they need somebody to help them. So I did that for about 8 years, and that was where I met the person that told me I should pursue the PMP. And I'm glad I did because the timing that I got out of that industry into something else it was a good time for me to go through those different levels and get out of that and move down the road where I did different things. And it's been kind of a wild full circle because, like, there's a lot of people I know from when I was in banking, from when I was in mortgage origination, from disaster recovery. They're still in the same industry. And some of them, with all the uncertainty since the pandemic, were like, tell us how you changed roles. Tell us how you got out of the industry. Tell
Yeah.
us how you got your PMP. And so I've been in a position to try and explain that as best as I could. It wasn't always climbing the corporate ladder because there has been no ladder. There's been like layoff, the rung flies off, and then you start back at the bottom and you
Yeah.
climb back up, and another layoff shoots up, and you're like, what do I do now? And so, like, a lot of it is literally just figuring it out when changes happen constantly and just adapting and being resilient. So, I try to
Yes.
encourage people to think about that a lot too. And
Well, and everything that you're sharing with us, I love this because we're hearing about your personal transformation, your career transformation, transformations that are happening from your impact in working on this wellness project and disaster recovery, team transformations as well, helping people through that. And that's again one of the reasons why project management is such an awesome opportunity for people who care about people. First of all, I mean, I think firmly believe, I know that in order to be a fantastic project manager, you have to care about people. I once
Right.
worked with a guy, he was like, I don't like people. And I thought, well, you probably aren't going to make it very far in project management. But
Yeah.
um, the truth of the matter is that it's a people-centered career. We're not walking around with clipboards anymore, checking things off most
Right.
of the time. Um, we have all this technology that does that stuff for us. And so what's
Right.
left? It's the leadership. It's the people side of things. It's the, like we talked about at the beginning, is this project actually a success or did we just check off all the boxes kind of a thing?
Right.
That's what it really is. And getting into that and teaching people how to do that. I mean, that's what this channel is all about. And there's over 250 videos on here. So it's definitely not a one and done kind of a topic. And one of the
Right.
ways that we learn about it is by hearing experiences from folks about, what does your career look like? How has it looked like for you?
Right. And I think too, I mean, I know I've been telling a lot of stories in this too, rather than just, I guess, even defining success, so I'm thinking about that a little bit in my head too. It's definitely not checking the boxes. And success is something that you really have to navigate through incrementally because the definition of success changes and it's dependent upon the culture, your client, what they want. But I think just really tuning into the conversations with people and having those check-ins. And even if you've got a client that's very resistant to meeting because they're too busy, trying to find a way to move that needle to open it up for the conversations and
An
just
email
really
check-in,
help coach
something.
them and guide them because
Yeah.
clients hire consultants because they may not have the resources or the time that they need to get the job done. So it really does lie on the clients to be an educator and a coach for
Mm-hmm.
those, for the people that they're serving, you
Mm-hmm.
know? So,
Yes, and coming up with creative ways. For
yeah,
example, if they say, no, we don't want to check in, we don't need a check in, having a couple other options in your back pocket so that it's
right,
not like you're abandoning check-ins altogether. Maybe it's every other week. Maybe it's super short check-ins and like you have a very, very clear agenda that's just 3 questions.
exactly.
Maybe it's an email check-in and then you only meet in person every 4 weeks or something like that, but some sort of a touch point so that there's visibility into
Right.
what's going on is so important. But with the team, I'm a firm advocate for the team needs to be in communication, like real-time communication
They do.
often,
They
often.
do.
Yeah.
And like I said, where I'm working right now, I mean, I feel like we have got that covered, which is great. I mean, there's still times that stuff slips, but I feel like for the most part, I'm in a culture right now that does prioritize that and takes the time to do it, and just if there's a question they have, just ping one another. So even finding out the preferred methods of communication, both with your team and with your stakeholders too, because even people in different time zones, is it email? Is it
Right.
Slack? And then just even defining those channels, because sometimes messages will get missed. If you have all these different sources that they're happening, it can be very, very easy to miss those messages. So just kind of keeping on top of that and figuring out, okay, what's going to be the best way to get this message across and ensure that it was received. Like a lot of times, what I've noticed we've started doing at work to acknowledge emails isn't so much a reply back, but just even where somebody puts a happy face on it, and you can see, okay, they received it, but it's not necessarily an whole extra thread
Right.
that you need to go through, and just even simple things like, I know this is goofy, but just coming in work, coming up with good naming conventions for things so people know where to find their work sequentially,
Yeah,
whether it's
that's
by date
huge. Yes.
or whether, because I've worked so many different places where we've had to do so much cleanup and rework because we've got too much technology. Like I had that in 2021, because I mean, again, that was kind of right after the pandemic. So it was like you had Slack, you had Jabber, you had Cisco, you had Teams, which one won? So we had to do this whole audit analysis of the benefits, who was using what, and you'd have certain team members just not checking in, and all the behavioral stuff with remote sometimes, because I didn't see the message. So
Right.
we had to clean all, we had to clean all of that up and figure out how to streamline and scale our systems of truth. So there wasn't too many options that lead to decision fatigue.
Yes. And
So,
redundancies and lost work and everything that
right.
happens when you have too many systems and hands in the pot and all of that. Tanya, I'm curious because your work is so creative. You talked about these, the talks that you put together and all of this, and your photography too. What is the role of creativity in project management? How can you encourage project managers to invite that in? What's worked for you?
I think that creativity and curiosity is everything. Just wondering about things, knowing to ask different questions, figuring out the right way to frame the question. And some of that can be creative as well, because there's power in our language. There's the disempowering phrases and there's also the empowering phrases. So, for instance, saying, really, this just isn't working versus what are some different ways that we can improve this process? What are your thoughts on
Mhm.
this? So it's an open-ended question that's curious and it invites your team or your stakeholder to think through their responses. And once they give that response, you can do different creative spins on this. A lot of times I know people that they're like, I'm not creative. I have no creative bone in their body. And some of those people I do view as being creative, even though they don't see themselves that way. But I think even enhancing it through even different brainstorming things like ChatGPT, coming to it for different ideas,
Mhm.
brainstorming different risks, brainstorming how to prioritize processes. I think having that tool right now enhances even very natural creatives. So I think there's certainly something there for people that don't view themselves as creative to even ask and try to practice that.
I love that. First of all, I don't believe that there is anyone out there who's not creative. I just don't believe that. I think it's a block that people have where they don't feel creative in a specific way. I
Right.
loved your suggestion too, because inviting that creativity in, that is inviting that curiosity in, that's inviting those questions in that we talked about at the beginning. And by doing that, by questioning, by learning, introducing new ideas, we're growing and we are
Absolutely.
transforming. So it all works together. And I just love that. I love that creativity is one of your focuses too. It's really important in project management.
Thank you.
And I love
Yes.
that you've been here with us today and shared what you
Me
have. It's
too.
been
Me
great.
too. I was so glad to get to do this. I have actually, I know I've been connected with you for years and I've always admired your writing style, your authenticity, and just your mission to help other people. So thank you for having me here today too.
Absolutely. I'm excited about this episode. Okay, Tanya, before we wrap, I would love it if you could share with the audience where they can find out more about you.
Okay. So there's several different ways. I'm always available on LinkedIn, and I think those are going to be shared as well, correct? The
Yes,
LinkedIn?
I will
Okay.
include those in the video description.
Okay, thank you. So LinkedIn, and then my photography is at tanyaboydphotography.com. And then I'm also a part of an educational company called Project Success Academy. So that's at projectsuccessacademy.com, where we've got training on PMP, other courses, and also communication courses. And additionally, I'm part of the Pure Management Alliance Collective. So that information is at puremanagementalliance.com, which all of this I do have on my LinkedIn as well.
Perfect.
So,
You're busy. You're busy.
yeah, it's picked up lately.
I love it. I love it. I'm going to check out your photography too. I've seen it on LinkedIn, but I want to check out your website.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, Tanya, thank you so much for being here with us, and we'll catch up soon.
All right. That sounds great. Thank you.